If we were to look at the story of the best decks in Marvel Snap in January 2026, there'd be two main headlines. First would be the evasive spread of Shou-Lao taking a bunch of decks out of the meta and being invasive, spreading into the best decks in Marvel Snap. And the second would be the story of how Ramp died because of Shou-Lao and how it eventually was reborn because of Fang Foom. Let's talk about it. The biggest headline this week is that Ramp returns as the best mid-range beater deck in Marvel Snap because of Fang Foom. The story of War Machine Ramp over the past 2 months is a story of birth, death, and then rebirth. What exactly does that mean? Well, War Machine Ramp really came onto the scene when War Machine got his buff, getting a lot more bulk, being able to stat check a lot of the decks in the metagame. And then it died when Shou-Lao burst onto the scene saying, oh, you can't stat check a lot of these mid-range decks anymore. Shou-Lao puts up a lot more power than these decks. And now it's a story of rebirth, as once again War Machine Ramp is a deck that has an extreme amount of bulk, making it one of the better mid-range beater decks in the game once again, on top of just having some good play into a lot of the other popular decks into this metagame. What exactly do I think is going for War Machine Ramp? Well, there's two main things that I would define as War Machine Ramp unique benefits to playing it. And the first one is the same one that it has been in the past, and it returns as that right now. First benefit is it just has a lot of difficulty to be teched against. How exactly do you tech against this deck? Well, there's no popular answer to how you tech against this deck. Stardust is really popular against like Hella Fang Foom. This deck does not care about Stardust. It can care about it for Blink, but more often than not, you can just play around not blinking your targets. This deck doesn't really care about Deafening Chord. You can activate your Chamber early, otherwise it's hitting KO or Chamber, and a lot of the big guys go past Deafening Chord, meaning that Deafening Chord is not a super tough card to deal with. Same thing with Shadow King, and on and on and on. The tech cards just aren't very targeted against this deck, which makes it one of the better mid-range beater decks in the game. The actual tech cards that would hurt this deck are like a US Agent or like a Shang-Chi. Those aren't very good tech cards, and they're not very popular, so the deck does not have to worry about it. If we look at this deck in a broader lens, it has something else unique going for it right now. I thought the old War Machine Ramp decks were uniquely good when they were able to play three big guys. My preferred version of the list was Galactus, Infinite, and Hulk Lane, just because there was more bulk and I was able to more stat check these mid-range decks. However, the deck had a lot more play with the Cosmic Ghost Rider deck because it could beat a lot of these combo decks where the original version could not. So what is going for it right now, you were able to replace Cosmic Ghost Rider with a bulk card that can also see play as a pseudo tech card in Fang Foom, and it kind of brings the best of both worlds, where Fang Foom essentially says, I can invest a lot of my power into one lane with my War Machine Infinite, I can play a very big lane there, and then I could use Fang Foom as a pseudo tech card against my opponent playing a lot of power, so they essentially have to play a lot of power plus some extra power to actually be able to beat me because my Fang Foom is so goddamn big. I think a huge trend this week is that most mid-range decks are migrating to becoming Shou-Lao decks. Nothing exemplifies this more than our second deck, HYDRA Stomper move. I think it's important to discuss this deck in relation to other Shou-Lao decks and why exactly you would want to play one of these decks and what are the unique benefits, because Shou-Lao we already know is one of the strongest decks in the game, so why is this the best mid-range deck over the other Shou-Lao mid-range decks? Well, I think the unique benefit of this is the better points floor, meaning that you can see a lot more play in your worst hands, and you'll just end up winning more games because the Shou-Lao pop-off games, you are already winning regardless of what Shou-Lao deck you're playing. So let's talk about what exactly makes this a uniquely positioned deck in the metagame. First of all, there's not a lot of move hate, and this deck has a bit more play into a bunch of the other decks, as opposed to the Shou-Lao decks, because its counters aren't as readily available. When you think about the Scarlet Spider decks, it very much gets hurt by Stardust, which is more popular, because Hell is getting more popular, so moving away from that is already one unique benefit. The second thing is important to note is why exactly we're playing Shou-Lao. We're not playing Shou-Lao for the point floor, we're playing it for the point ceiling. Maverick Shou-Lao, Scarlet Spider Shou-Lao, they are just these huge pop-offs, and adding those to any deck basically migrates some of that pop-off to your deck. You get the same pop-off potential as the Shou-Lao decks, but you have a higher point floor because you're playing a better early package. A lot of the Shou-Lao decks right now are opting for these early packages that don't have a lot of board presence, and they're very much disruption focused with Deafening Chord, with Spider Ham. They're very much focused on being these annoying decks. This deck does it a bit differently. Instead of doing disruption, that can be a lot of feast or famine. You either hit the card you really need to hit, or you don't, and you end up losing the game. This deck says, I'm just going to play a lot more points than you. I'm going to play one of the better points packages currently in the game, while maintaining some disruption with Deafening Chord and Cosmo. It plays this Craven move package with Silk, with Hydra Stomper, with Bowchalk, and a lot of times you look at this deck, and it'll just be able to win off points alone, even when you don't draw your Shou-Lao. That's something that the other Shou-Lao decks are unable to do, and a unique benefit, and why I think this is one of the best mid-range decks in the game. But then you do get your games where you play Shou-Lao, Maverick Prodigy, and you win those games as well. So where I think the other decks are win more decks, where they end up winning by a larger amount, I think this deck is a win more deck in the sense that it wins more often. Because yes, it does have that Shou-Lao pop-off potential, but other than that, it still just has the pop-off Hydra Stomper potential of being able to win these more gritty games because Hydra Stomper move is such a good early package that can translate into the late game. Another weird trend that has popped up is that the best anti-Shou-Lao decks or Shou-Lao decks, let's talk about our third deck, anti-Shou Shou-Lao. To understand why anti-Shou-Lao decks have moved towards Shou-Lao and why the best counter meta decks are playing the meta themselves, we have to understand what other Shou-Lao decks are trying to do and how exactly this sees play into them and what makes this such a good anti-Shou-Lao list despite running Shou-Lao. One of the key dynamics we have to think about are what are the highest point ceiling decks that this deck has to beat that are running Shou-Lao, and that, in my opinion, would be the Silver Surfer decks. Deafening Chord sees a lot of play into these Silver Surfer decks because it basically hits all the important pieces with Deafening Chord, meaning that those Maverick, Carter, pop-offs with Brood become very difficult when you're playing against a Deafening Chord. So this anti-Shou-Lao list is able to beat up on those Shou-Lao lists a bit. On top of that, it runs Cosmo, Ham, and Copycat, giving 3 different ways to see play into different Shou-Lao lists. The Cosmo is specifically really good into the zombie list, those zombie Shou-Lao lists that were popping up. Cosmo very much stops them from building up one of their lanes, making it very difficult for them to beat you when you are doing your own Shou-Lao pop-up stuff. And then we see both Spider Ham and Copycat appear in this list for the same reason as Cosmo appears in this list, not so much to target the zombie list, but to target the Shou-Lao list themselves. Basically, you're saying if I'm playing my Shou-Lao stuff, you're playing your Shou-Lao stuff, my Ham has a 1 in 12, 1 in 8 chance to hit your important stuff, specifically your Shou-Lao or your Scarlet Spider for Activate Ham on turn 4, making it very difficult for you to do your pop-off stuff because I'm playing a better list. I have more pop-off potential because your Ham is something that is a bit worse, and then a bit worse for you, you can play your combo of Maverick or Scarlet Spider plus Shou-Lao. However, I can play my combo of Maverick, Scarlet Spider plus Shou-Lao, so I'm going to end up beating you just because of the Ham disruption. On a similar note, Copycat basically says, I have another chance of getting Maverick, I have another chance of getting Scarlet Spider, I have another chance of getting Shou-Lao. If I get a 3-5 Shou-Lao, I automatically win the game. You can't Shou-Lao, I can 3-5 Shou-Lao. I'm better off than what you're doing. It's a similar dynamic with Maverick and Scarlet Spider. If you don't have either of those cards, and I do have those cards, I'm more likely to get my combo of Maverick plus Shou-Lao, Scarlet Spider plus Shou-Lao, and I'll end up winning the game just because my combo is a bit better than your combo because you didn't draw one of your pieces and my Copycat copied one of those pieces. So what exactly is this deck's position in the metagame? It's basically saying Shou-Lao is the best finisher in the game. I'm going to make it as difficult as possible for you to do Shou-Lao stuff that isn't this deck, and I'm going to make it the most likely that I can do Shou-Lao stuff and you can't do Shou-Lao stuff, and that's enough to win a lot of these Shou-Lao matchups. With that context of the metagame, the best way to beat Shou-Lao decks right now is to go way over the top of it. The first deck that does this is All-In Tribunal. Tribunal is the best combo list in the game, in my opinion, because it just goes way over the top of every other combo list, and it goes way over the top of anything that doesn't have a direct answer to it. Right now, Enchantress isn't very popular, only seeing play really in War Machine Ramp, which bodes well for Tribunal. And then Red Guardian, another deck that can often disrupt it, Mr. Fantastic and Iron Man, is not a very popular deck, with Deafening Chord being a much more popular card, meaning that Tribunal has a lot more freedom to play its Tribunal game plan while still being able to invest in a secondary game plan for some redundancy and for being able to win games where you don't necessarily draw your primary Tribunal game plan. Because this list puts up so much points, it is very difficult for most combo lists to play against Tribunal, and it is very unlikely that most combo lists will be able to beat Tribunal just because you'll be able to go over the top of most combo lists. And it's also equally as likely that most Shou-Lao lists don't have an answer to your deck, meaning that you can as well just go way over the top of the Shou-Lao list because they don't have any direct tech cards against you. So what exactly are the combos that I'm talking about that put up so much power? Well, I'll make it very simple for you. The first combo is the Tribunal combo. Iron Man, Onslaught, Tribunal, maybe you Prodigy and Iron Man, you double, 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 there's so many doubles there that you end up getting 60, 100-point lanes, and it's very difficult for most decks to beat 60, 100-point lanes for obvious reasons. The second very much combo that you can do that still puts up a reasonable amount of points to win a lot of combo matchups as well as just direct matchups is you can play Mr. Fantastic, Moonstone, Mystique, Prodigy, and basically you get like 2 Moonstones there, or you get like 2 Mr. Fantastics there. You start doubling them up a bunch of times, and then you look at your final lane, and it is extremely big just because you have like 20 procs of Mr. Fantastic going on. Your middle lane's not that big, your side lanes end up being humongous because you're getting like 60 to 80 power because you're getting +3 like 20 times, so 60 power on the side lanes. And that's enough to win a lot of games. The other combo deck that goes way over the top of the metagame and is very hard to answer is Man Spider combo, making it our 5th deck in this tier list. Because of the Shou-Lao meta, the Man Spider Galactus deck has had a very interesting metagame trajectory. One of the important things to note about the Shou-Lao meta is it made Shadow King a lot less popular because it conflicts with the Shou-Lao game plan. Shadow King very much doesn't tech very well into Shou-Lao already, but as well as that, Shou-Lao is a card you overwhelmingly want to play on the last turn, and since it costs 5 energy, it's very unlikely that you're able to play Shadow King on the last turn, meaning a lot of these Shou-Lao decks have opted to drop Shadow King. The best deck at punishing a lack of Shadow King is Man Spider, just because it can put up a tremendous amount of points if your opponent does not have a Shadow King. Let's talk about the key lines that make this one of the best decks in the game, and the key lines that put up a tremendous amount of power that even Tribunal sometimes can have trouble beating it. So first of all, there's the very simple line of, oh, my opponent does have Shadow King, which is pretty rare in this meta. You can play something like a Shuri into a Fallen one. Last turn, you can both Man Spider and Taskmaster. You can even play your Man Spider onto like an Agony lane. That's a ton of like doubles, and that is just more than enough to beat a lot of mid-range matchups. That's one of the unique things about these Man Spider decks, is they are able to answer the question of how do I beat Shadow King pretty well. Now let's assume your opponent is not playing Shadow King. How exactly does this deck match up into non-Shadow King matchups? Well, it can absolutely thrash them. So a common line would be like a Luna Snow into a Man Spider into an Absorbing Man. Last turn you can play Fastball Special out of Mind Infusion. You basically get essentially 2 Man Spiders, very, very tall, and your opponent often can't beat that because the Absorbing Man not times 2s the Man Spider, it times 4s the Man Spider, and that's a ton of value. The other line from that is another way to get those 2 Man Spiders is to play Taskmaster, and that is also more than enough power to beat the majority of decks. If we're looking at a bit of the offlines in this deck, a lot of the time you can maybe do like a Fastball Special your Man Spider plus a Galactus, and that'll be more than enough to win a game. Let's say you can't do that. Another unique benefit that I often see with this deck is that you can, let's say, play a Galactus on turn 5. Oh, damn it, I didn't hit my Galactus. But what you can do now is you can Fastball Special plus Adamite Infusion. That's more than enough to win a game. We can even consider some weirder lines. What if I Luna Snow into Shuri, play Galactus on turn 5, and then on turn 6, I Adamite Infusion my Galactus, Fastball Special Adamite Infusion my Galactus. My opponent has to play around that. That's a lot of power, and it is a very, very confusing playline, but it's a playline that nevertheless can win and nevertheless can activate Galactus and be a very fun pop-off. And with those 5 lists, that's the story of what the metagame is right now. You're playing these very high point floor decks, you're playing some variation of Shou-Lao because he's by far the best finisher in the game, or you're playing some variation of an uber tall combo deck to be able to go over these Shou-Lao decks and these very high point floor decks. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and support my video that is popping up on the screen right now. I want to move to more videos a week, and your support will very much be appreciated in that effort. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you guys all for watching and see you in the next video.